Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. Today we're talking Kino Lorber again, and mostly 4Ks. Got some 4Ks to showcase for you, some recent stuff from Kino, but I want to start it off with a recent Kino Blu-ray regular release, not a 4K, that is of a film that I had almost forgotten about myself, but in rewatching it, I was reminded how much I enjoy it, and that is the movie Best of Times from 1986. As you can see, it stars Robin Williams and Kurt Russell, and it is directed by, I believe, Roger Spottiswoode, who's done some interesting films in the genre space and outside of the genre space. But this is written by Ron Shelton, who, of course, did Bull Durham and Tin Cup, which I'm a huge fan. He's a big sports movie guy. And so this is a script by Ron Shelton. And I forget how much of it is based on, it's about a town called Taft, California. And their rival is Bakersfield, California. And the movie opens actually with sort of a almost newsreel kind of history of Taft and Bakersfield and this ongoing rivalry, setting up sort of the two towns as like these enemies, I guess. And so it's a story about this small town in present day, 86, whatever. And Robin Williams works for a bank now, and we find out that he has never really lived down this one big football game that his high school played against Bakersfield in the 1970s. And the quarterback back then was that's Reno Hightower, played by Kurt Russell. And so the idea of that game was that there was a chance, I think, for Taft to win it, but Robin Williams' character dropped a very crucial pass from Reno Hightower in the last seconds of that game, and they lost the game. And so he has since then been haunted by that pass and dropping the ball. And in fact, his father-in-law is played by Donald Moffat from The Thing, and his father-in-law is like a big Bakersfield guy, like Bakersfield alum, and even makes fun of Robin Williams, like kind of does things like whoa, just like little jokes that are, obviously very hurtful things. So Robin Williams' character, it's a very interesting small town. Like they have a small town psychic who lives in a trailer that Robin Williams goes to, but she's also a prostitute, but he goes there for therapy. Anyway, and Kurt Russell's character now runs a van detailing business where he paints like elaborate murals on the sides of vans and does car repair. And so his life hasn't turned out great either. And I think he sort of sees, he doesn't necessarily think of that game as the turning point, but he definitely doesn't see it as a positive thing that happened for him. So somebody mentions the idea of, well, you should just play the game again. And he's like, well, we can't do that. And then suddenly it becomes an idea that they'll play the game again. They'll find all the alums from both teams and get them together and play the game one more time. And so it's a really interesting build because there's a lot of small town, set up at the beginning. And then, that game does happen, and I'm not going to say which way it goes, but, it's just it's a rewarding sports film regardless. And one that I don't think a lot of people have seen. So I was very excited to check it out again, and I was not disappointed. The supporting cast includes Pamela Reed, again, Donald Moffat. Oh boy, there's some other recognizable folks in here I'm blanking on right now, but it's a really solid movie, and one that I do recommend. It has a new commentary with director Roger Spottiswoode and Ron Shelton, which is really neat to hear their thoughts on the film and their recollections of it. And so definitely one that I give a big thumbs up to and wanted to put at the top of this video so that you all see it and check it out. It's well worth your time. Now, let's talk 4Ks. We will start with Billy Wilder and his film Stalag 17 from 1953. This film, 4K Ultra HD and Blu-ray, has some nice features I'll go into in a second, but it's a POW movie. It is sort of the taking off point for Hogan's Heroes. If you're familiar with that show, it's kind of that, where like you have these American POWs in a German POW camp, and they kind of have this rivalry with their captors, but there's a lot of joking around, but there's also the threat of being shot, so it's kind of an odd, but it makes sense in that it's Billy Wilder, and he often injected comedy into his films, and he did a lot of he often did a mix. Like, his comedies are often a mix of drama and comedy, and this is no exception to that. I also find it interesting that this is the film he did on the heels of Ace in the Hole, which is, maybe his least comedic movie, but a biting satire that still holds up to this day. So he does Sunset Boulevard 1950, Ace in the Hole 1951, and Stalag 17 in 1953, and then in 54 he does his version of Sabrina. But anyway, brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the 35 original camera negative. And it says legendary star and director of 1950's Sunset Boulevard, William Holden and Billy Wilder. Of course, they're reunited here too. Reteamed 3 years later for the gripping World War II drama Stalag 17. The result was a 1953 Best Director Oscar nomination for Wilder and the elusive Best Actor Oscar for Holden. The iconic star of The Bridges of Toko Ri and The Bridge on the River Kwai plays the jaded, scheming Sergeant J.J. Sefton, a POW at the notorious German prison camp, who spends his days dreaming up rackets and trading with Germans for special privileges. But when two prisoners are killed in an escape attempt, it becomes obvious that there is a spy among them. Is it Sefton? Famed filmmaker Otto Preminger takes a rare acting role as the camp's commandant. He's really kind of perfect for this, and if you know his personality as a yeller and somebody who was not necessarily pleasant to work with, he plays pretty great as a Nazi commandant. And Robert Strauss, let's see here, as in the role of Animal, very interesting character, sort of a ragged, yelly kind of dude that's intriguing as a character, very kind of funny. The granddaddy of all World War II POW films, says Leonard Maltin, a powerful anti-war classic from the brilliant creator of Five Graves to Cairo, A Foreign Affair, Sabrina, Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment. And of course, he would do most of those after this film. So yeah, it's an interesting story because we have an immediate setup of like two guys are going to escape, and will they get away? No, they won't. And there's a couple other actors you'd recognize in this. Peter Graves is one of them. He's head of security, and he is baffled why things are happening the way they are. And there's a lot of people that look at Holden's character who, at the outset, before the guys even leave the camp, makes a bet. They bet with cigarettes. That's their currency. He bets with cigarettes that they will not make it because he just doesn't believe that it's safe. And he wins that bet. And then he goes and buys like an egg with his cigarette winnings, like an egg that he can fry up and eat. And, these guys get like potato soup for breakfast, which is probably just potato water, really. So an egg is a really hot commodity. But anyway, so it becomes a sort of a mystery whodunit. Like, who's the guy? Is it Holden? Is it someone else? What went down? And it's neat to see where it goes. And it's, like I said, it's a well done script. I think it's based on the play by Donald Bevan and Ermund Trzynski, and Billy Wilder co-wrote the screenplay with Edwin Blum. And it's a good script. So very I think, underrated Billy Wilder. I think this one in the last 5-10 years has dropped back in terms of its prominence, so it's nice to see this 4K come and hopefully get it some more attention. But it has some nice commentary tracks here. We have an audio commentary by filmmaker, historian Steve Mitchell, and combat films American realism author Stephen J. Rubin. That's one. Then we have a commentary by film historian Joseph McBride, who wrote the book Billy Wilder, Dancing on the Edge. And then we have a third commentary by actors Richard Erdman and Gil Stratton with co-playwright Donald Bevan. So you have some cast members and the co-playwright getting more insights from the inside of this, which is cool. So that's 3 commentaries, really neat. And then something called Stalag 17 from Reality to Screen featurette, as well as a Real Heroes of Stalag 17B featurette. So some, true back to life kind of stuff, like what really went down. But very enjoyable and definitely worth a pickup, especially for Billy Wilder fans. Stalag 17. Next up, a big turn into Red Dragon territory. This film from 2002. I had not seen this movie. For whatever reason, I think at the time and to this day, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of Brett Ratner's work. And so, knowing that this was kind of a retread of the Manhunter story, the story that Michael Mann made into Manhunter, it's the same Thomas Harris novel that it's based on. Knowing that I would be seeing another version of a movie that I already really like, I was unsure. And so I didn't see it at the time. So this was my first view of this. And it's interesting, Do I like it as much as Manhunter? No, I don't. But it's a very slick movie. Both films share the same director of photography, Dante Spinotti. But I do find it interesting the way that Ratner works with him versus the way that Mann did, because Mann definitely goes very stylish. I mean, he's an incredibly stylish guy in general, but in terms of lighting, there is a little bit of style here too. I mean, the Blu-ray, the 4K looks very nice, This is a brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the 35 camera negative. So it looks good. But I just noticed differences in the way that they handle the material and the way that they shoot them. And so you have, in this case, Anthony Hopkins returning to his role as Hannibal Lecter. But the tricky thing is, in Manhunter, Brian Cox plays Hannibal Lecter. And so I already have this idea of Lecter. And here's the thing, too. I love Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs as Lecter. Obviously, that's my first exposure to Lecter. But going back and watching Brian Cox's take on it in Manhunter, I've come to really like him almost maybe more. There's some things that Hopkins does that are pretty arch, pretty theatrical, and I get that's the character too, but when you see Cox's version, it's a little more low-key, but still threatening and very interesting. Anyway, a lot of things that are hard for me to separate. And the other thing that's hard for me to separate is the Will Graham character. In this case, it's played by Edward Norton, and in Manhunter, it's played by William Peterson, and I do think it's one of Peterson's best performances. I think the way that he's found the character of Will Graham and how he is on the edge, as Lecter points out, like he thinks like they do, meaning like he thinks like a serial killer, which is why he's able to catch them. I don't feel like Norton quite achieves what Peterson achieves with this performance. I feel like he's doing something else, which is a perfectly reasonable choice. I'm sure Norton's a fan of the William Peterson performance, and it must be tough to step into a role that has already been inhabited by another actor. He's just doing something that's a little bit more detached, but not, I don't know, I can't explain it. I just didn't quite like it as much. But regardless, it has many of the same beats as Manhunter because it's based on the same novel. It does have a different ending, which I did find very interesting. And it also has Ralph Fiennes playing the Tooth Fairy, playing Dollarhide in this. And, Ralph Fiennes is also a great actor, but it's tough to top the performance from Manhunter. There's just no, I don't know. It's a hard thing, like I said, to have two versions of a film. Remakes are always an interesting and volatile topic. Like there are certainly ones that are better than the originals. But I think when you have a performance or multiple performances, Tom Noonan was the Tooth Fairy in The Manhunters, and he's really incredible in that. And there's something about him as an actor and the way that he speaks. He has a certain cadence. Pause for thought or something that really works well with the Tooth Fairy character. Makes him feel more unpredictable. Like in that moment he's taking to think about whatever, he could be thinking about whether he's deciding if he's going to kill you or not. He may like you in that moment. Anyway, but again, fascinating watch for me. And this cast also includes Philip Seymour Hoffman, who writes for a tabloid called The Tatler. And that role I found very interesting too, because that one is played by Stephen Lang from Avatar, with crazy curly hair in Manhunter. And Jack Crawford, that character is played by Dennis Farina in Manhunter. It's played by Harvey Keitel in this film. So it's one of those that I will always have Manhunter in my heart, but it was nice to see this one and nice to see it put up on its feet and as a bigger budget movie, but ultimately not quite as satisfying. Some nice features here, though. This has an audio commentary by director Brett Ratner and screenwriter Ted Talley. An isolated score with audio commentary by composer Danny Elfman, which is cool. Director's Journey documentary, The Making of Red Dragon featurette, plus 7 more featurettes on various things from special effects to actor interviews. Storyboard to final film comparison, Brett Ratner's student film. Very interesting. I don't think it has sound. At least I couldn't get to play with sound. 7 deleted scenes, 4 alternate scenes, 3 extended scenes. This is a Blu-ray 4K set. So what you have is the commentaries on the 4K, and then the Blu-ray has those commentaries, and it has the additional features as well. But no features on the 4K, because we're trying to keep that bitrate pure, which is nice. So that is the new Red Dragon 4K. All right, next up we got some horror-ish stuff with Cujo from 1983. This film directed by Louis Teague. I find it fascinating that, well, there's a couple commentaries on here. There's 2 from Louis Teague, one from 2007, one from 2013, and then another commentary by Lee Gambin, author of Nope, Nothing Wrong Here, The Making of Cujo. He also is just a big Animal Attacks guy, Lee Gambin. So very excited to dig into that track. But listening to the 2007 commentary, a lot of neat stuff coming from Louis Teague, who's a director who got his start with Roger Corman, doing things like The Lady in Red and Alligator. And apparently Alligator is the movie that, and I love Alligator. I love that it's got its own 4K release. But that is the movie apparently that Stephen King saw, and that was something that was sort of an avenue in for Louis Teague to get this job. But it was a not so straight ahead road to get it. Apparently the project was set up a couple times, at least 1 or 2 studios, before it finally got to him and was produced by Dino De Laurentiis. But I think he did a solid job with it, and it's a movie that I hadn't seen in some time. Of course, I remember that the center of it is, this rabid St. Bernard dog that attacks Dee Wallace Stone and Danny Pintaro, her son, in a Pinto in this farmyard, and the car is stalled and they can't get away, so they're kind of stuck there. But I'd also forgotten how much of the movie that takes up. It's basically the last third of it, I guess the last act. But there's a lot of setup at the beginning of both Dee Wallace and her marriage and her having an affair. That's one thing that's happening. And then there's another part where her husband is trying to get his vintage Jaguar fixed, and they find this mechanic who works cheap, but he lives off in the boonies, and he has the dog. He has Cujo. That guy's played by Ed Lauter, one of my favorite character actors. That apparently is based on something that happened to Stephen King. Apparently his motorcycle was not working, and somebody recommended this guy out in the boonies, and he had a scary dog, and that sort of conjured this story. But I guess in the novel, the dog is, like Christine, the sort of reincarnation of a bad dude, and the dog is evil because of that. And so I don't even know if the dog gets bit by a vampire bat and becomes rabid at all, or if that's totally invented. I'm not actually sure. But the movie opens with this dog chasing a rabbit into a large hole, getting his head stuck in there, and it turns out to be a nest of bats. And one of the bats bites the dog on the nose, which triggers the rabies, which makes him crazy and then eventually go nuts. And he does kill a few people in the film pretty brutally. So there is a section where he's just running loose, killing people while we wait for the eventual collision of the other storyline. But a really neat commentary to hear. I mean, Teague is very proud of this film, and he believes a lot of it has to do with the fact that he had some of his best crew people that he worked with. He worked with Jan de Bont, which I'd totally forgotten. Jan de Bont shot this film, and he talks about Jan de Bont, this being early in his American career, because he had done work with Paul Verhoeven. He'd shot a bunch of Danish films for Verhoeven. That's how he got his start. But just talking about how working with Jan de Bont was really rewarding because he was open to and driven by challenges. Anything that they could, there's one like really, when you hear about how it was done, a pretty complicated 360 degree shot inside the Pinto that eventually turns and turns and turns until it becomes blurry. And they had to come up with a way to do it. Basically, they set up a rig on top of the car, they dropped a periscope camera in, and they just kind of, they're going back and forth between the mom as she's about to pass out from being bitten by the dog to the son, and back and forth and back and forth. Just hearing like how they did that shot and how he was interested in the challenge of doing it. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, a very nice 4K Blu-ray set. Again, we have the 4K including those commentaries. We have those the three commentaries I mentioned. And then the Blu-ray includes those, and then it also includes Cujo Revisited, a roundtable with stars Dee Wallace, Danny Pintaro, and Daniel Hugh Kelly, and director Louis Teague. Daniel Hugh Kelly is the husband in the film. So it's just them kind of sitting in a corner in four chairs talking about their recollections of the film, but it's new. So that's nice. Dog Days, The Making of Cujo. I think that is from a previous release, maybe a DVD, but it's a nice overview of the film, including older interviews with the director and, some Stephen King expert. And then we have a bunch of stuff from, I guess, a Eureka Blu-ray release where it's interviews with Dee Wallace, composer Charles Bernstein, stuntman Gary Morgan, who actually plays the dog in a suit. He said they used like, I think 10 different St. Bernards because each one had different specialties, and they used a guy in a suit for a couple shots. And so there's shots of him on set with this St. Bernard costume. Anyway, he was a suit guy, like a man in a suit, monster guy. Stunt woman Jean Coulter, casting director Marcia Ross, visual effects artist Kathy Lawrence, special effects designer Robert Clark, and dog trainer Teresa Miller. So a lot of folks interviewed on the Blu-ray, giving you a real nice look at the full production and what was involved. And I'm always curious about that stuff because I love animal attacks, but I also love to hear, how do you deal with animals? Like, that must be very tricky, and like just little things like Louis Teague talking about a shot where the dog has to charge at the car and eventually smacks his head into the door. He said to do that shot, we basically had to take the doors off the car and signal the dog to run at the car and run through the car, run through the front seat out the other side. Like that's how they did that shot. And there's all kinds of little bits like that. Like for this shot, we had to get the dog to do this. And in this sequence, I wanted to make sure people didn't think we actually hit a dog with a bat. So you will never see the dog actually hit with a bat. You'll see lots of POV camera with Dee Wallace hitting the camera, kind of stuff. So lots of cool stuff on the making of this. And it's a brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from the 4K scan of the original camera negative, yet again. And it looks better than I've ever seen it look. So these 4Ks are very solid. Closing out with one I should have covered a long time ago, but Just getting around to now, that's Rawhead Rex. This is a Clive Barker film. It's written by Clive Barker, that is, and directed by George Pavlou. And for those who don't know, again, this is a brand new 4K restoration from the original camera negative. He's pure evil, pure power, pure terror. Rawhead Rex is a demon alive for millennia, trapped in the depths of hell and waiting for release. He is held by an ancient seal, imprisoned for centuries in a barren field near the hamlet of Rathmore, Ireland. In time, this gruesome legacy has been forgotten, dismissed as an odd pre-Christian myth, until Tom Guerin decides to plow his field, the field of his ancestors knew better than to disturb. The seal is broken and an unspeakable evil is unleashed on a rampage of blood and lust. Howard Hallenbeck, an American historian on a working vacation with his family, discovers on the stained glass windows of the local church the series of scenes illustrating the reign of terror of Rawhead Rex. But the one piece of glass depicting the defeat of the monster is missing. Howard is desperate for an answer, for Rawhead is loose. He is insatiable. Director George Pavlou, with a screenplay by horror legend Clive Barker, from his classic Books of Blood. So that is kind of what Rawhead Rex looks like. He's kind of a crazy, tall monster thing, and he just tears people up. And he gets loose in your house, and it's bad news. It's real bad news. And how will they beat him? I'm not going to spoil that, but it's definitely a thing that he may be a little silly of a monster in some sense, but this movie does have a cult following, I think, for a reason, because it's pretty memorable, and the Clive Barker factor, certainly. But some nice features here. This is, again, a 4K Ultra HD and a Blu-ray, and I believe the commentary is the only feature on the 4K. Audio commentary with director George Pavlou, moderated by author Stephen Thrower, a great genre film writer, one that I adore, and so he's a great man to have on your commentary. I actually wish he moderated more commentaries. And then in terms of the Blu-rays features, you have Call Me Rawhead, an interview with actor Heinrich von Bono. I guess he played Rex. Growing Pains, The Children of Rawhead, interview with actors Hugh O'Connor and Karis Venice Lunny. What the Devil Hath Wrought, interview with actor Ronan Wilmot. Rock and Roll, The Rex Sessions, interview with composer Colin Towns. Rawhead Effects, A Cock and Bull Story, interviews with crew members. And Rawhead Rising, interview with artist Stephen R. Bissett. So a really packed special edition. I think the Blu-ray that was released previously had all these features. I'm not sure if any of these are new features, but we do have, again, a brand new 4K restoration from the original camera negative of Rawhead Rex for folks to check out. I should have brought this out during October. I apologize for being late, but still worth picking up if you're a fan of cult horror. So anyway, that will do it for this show. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.